Hello, and welcome to our session on global learning and innovation, Finland, Northern Ireland, and inclusion of students with disabilities at Loyola Marymount University and in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. I'm Dr. Victoria Graff from Loyola Marymount University, and I'm joined here on screen by Dr. Elizabeth Gregg from the LA Archdiocese and also Ryan Halverson from the Los Angeles Archdiocese. And we're here to share about a partnership between Loyola Marymount University and the Department of Catholic Schools in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles as we look at innovative models, international models of education, and how these models can be used in the LA Archdiocese to create a network of schools that are going to implement successful learning models from trips to Finland and Northern Ireland in elementary and high schools. I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Gregg, who's going to introduce the topic of inclusion and the need to focus on its improvement.
Hi, thank you. It's great to be able to speak with everyone today about a huge passion of mine, which is inclusion students in our Archdiocese. And we're one of the largest dioceses in the United States, and we have a huge number of students at our school sites. We have 250 elementary schools and high schools and serve well over 40,000 students. And so of those 40,000 students, we have at least, we know from surveying our schools that we at least 5% of those students, close to 2,000 students, are students with disabilities. And we serve a wide range of disabilities at our school sites, from ADHD to autism to dyslexia to Down syndrome. And our school principals are doing this on a very tight budget. One of the things, we're in California, and in California, we don't receive any state funding for students with disabilities. And so much of the funding comes from the tuition that schools bring in themselves, or what parents can provide to support students with disabilities. And so that becomes a huge challenge in our Archdiocese, because we have schools that have more income and tuition, and parents that have more resources than other schools, which aren't bringing in as much tuition, or the parents don't have the resources. And yet we're serving all of these different students. So how can we serve our students, be able to help them the best that we can, even though we don't always necessarily have the dollar amounts that we need to be able to do that, even if we have the desire to do so. And then on the other hand, sometimes we have the resources at sites, we have money to help the students, but maybe the disposition isn't necessarily there, well, I don't know if we're able to help students. I think that might be something that's done in public schools, or I'm not quite sure how to do that. So one of the things that we're really, struggling with is how can we help our school sites not only get more resources, but feel confident in helping the students with disabilities that they do have at their school sites.
So what I kind of want to talk about is how our focus on looking to global models on how to improve education in the Archdiocese has connected us with the focus on inclusion, and also our partnership with Loyola Marymount. So back in 2018, when I was a principal at the time, now serving as an assistant superintendent, there was a group of us that approached the Archdiocese about taking a group of principals to Finland to study how they were able to be what many people consider to be one of the most successful education models in the world, and kind of go on a fact-finding mission. What are they doing well, and how can we learn from that, and what could we bring back and possibly implement in our own schools and find success? So we went on that trip with several principals from the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, and the model of that trip was to prep, go on the trip, come back, debrief, and then figure out what it is that we wanted to implement, what was transferable, what could work in our schools, and then implement that plan for a year and beyond, and then measure how well that implementation plan was going, collect data, surveys, looking at testing scores, different things like that. What was great about that trip is that it led to Dr. Graff, to my right, reaching out to us and basically saying, you guys had such a successful trip and it was such an amazing thing watching you guys go on that trip. I have this connection with Northern Ireland, where there's been a focus on looking at shared education and inclusion. Could we do something like that in partnership with one another? And so what was great is that Elizabeth and I linked up, and instead of it being a fact-finding mission like Finland was, it was inclusion is an identified area of growth for our Archdiocese. So here's now an opportunity to go on another trip with another group of principals, but this focus was on inclusion specifically. How can we use this, looking to a global model, looking to another country, one that's demonstrated success in working with other schools, the shared education model, and have demonstrated a focus on inclusion. Go look at those schools and then apply the same model that we did with Finland, right? Go on a trip, come back, come up with an implementation plan, and then execute that in our schools. So I'm going to kick it over to Dr. Graff to kind of talk about what that trip looked like and take us to where we are today in implementing now a second global initiative with our principals in ADLA.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, it's been very exciting to collaborate with these principals and with the LA Archdiocese. At the university, we have had a commitment to inclusion in Catholic schools. We've had programs where we have prepared teachers and leaders in terms of being able to include students with disabilities in Catholic schools. We've been doing this really for about 20 years now in various dioceses. But I also had the personal experience of having gone to Northern Ireland. And actually my first visit was to a conference on inclusion. And it was quite fascinating to go to Northern Ireland, which historically speaking has been a society of conflict. I mean, for 30 years, they've had what they've called the Troubles, where they have had fighting amongst the communities in Northern Ireland. Many times people will identify it as a religious war, if you will, between Protestants and Catholics, but it's really a matter of identity. And so there's been a lot of research coming out of Queen's University Belfast, where they have developed this model of shared education, where you bring communities together to collaborate, to learn from each other, and in many ways, in what we call contested spaces. And so over time, it's not something that's happened overnight. These schools the Protestant schools and the Catholic schools have been able to share and to learn from each other. And so my particular area of interest was not only this notion of communities coming together, but how students with disabilities would be included in this notion of shared education. So when I heard about the trip that the principals from the LA Archdiocese went, they were able to go to Finland, I was able to connect with Ryan Halverson and some of his colleagues in the LA Archdiocese and said, I think we have a possibility of taking some principals over to Northern Ireland to meet with not only Catholic schools, but also with the Protestant schools, and to see how this partnership would work, and to see how students with disabilities were being included in this collaboration among these two systems of schools. So that was the genesis of the idea. We were able to do it just before the pandemic. We were able to spend a week over there touring around, listening to the researchers on shared education, and it's been a very profitable experience. And now I'm pleased to say that 3 of the principals who went on the trip are going to be enrolling in our inclusion program to further their knowledge and expertise. And so we're very excited to have that next step in terms of the work as a result of the trip to Northern Ireland. So now I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Gregg and to talk about how the group of principals from Northern Ireland are also coming together to expand their knowledge and implementation of inclusion.
One of the most interesting things while we were on the trip, because we sort of had this idea, well, maybe they're able to do all these things with inclusion because they're getting money from the state in Northern Ireland, and that's why they're able to do this. And as we went to the schools, one of the things that we found out was that as we talked to principals, I mean, the average amount that they were getting was $6,000. I mean, that's how much we charge in tuition, right, for a school. So it wasn't really a financial thing. It was really more about having an open disposition. And as we interviewed different principals and teachers, and just said, well, how did you get this way? Like how were you able to do this? And they would just talk about their process of, we worked with the university, we learned about different disabilities of students that were in our class, and we worked together and we created a plan and we helped them, support plans, very similar to the support plans that we have at our schools. So it became more about disposition. So, well, disposition is something that's free, right? That doesn't cost any money. So we were sitting on the bus on the trip, and one of the principals that we have here today, Paulette, she said, have you ever heard of a man named Dr. Michael Boyle and a book called Ensuring a Place at the Table? And I said, gosh, no, I haven't. So she downloaded the book, and we were there with Adrian too, and we looked at this book and we read it and said, we had this aha moment. And it said, if we could do what was in this book, overcome these dispositions, put together action plans at our sites and collect data, we can make this happen at pilot schools in our diocese, and we can expand that. And that's all free. That doesn't cost anything. And so we came back, we have an inclusion committee that Dr. Graf is a member of, as well as Adrian and Paulette, who will be speaking today as well. But one of the things that we are implementing with our group of principals that came back is to do these action plans in school this year from Dr. Michael Boyle's book, Ensuring a Place at the Table, and collect that data so we can grow inclusion. So I hope Paulette and Adrian will share more on that today.
So we want to kind of transition and talk a little bit about what happens when we come back from these trips. So I want to share a little bit about very basically what happened with our Finland trip in terms of coming back and how we've been able to successfully implement some plans. And then I'm going to turn it over to the two guest principals that we have on this presentation. And I'll allow them to introduce themselves and talk about their experience specifically with the Northern Ireland trip. But after we came back from the Finland trip, what we did is we debriefed, and to kind of extend Dr. Greg's point about financial constraints did not have to be a reason why we couldn't do things. Part of the reason being is the group of principals that we took to Finland very purposefully represented a huge range of schools. So we from affluent Catholic schools to inner city Catholic schools. So schools that, financing something was not going to be an issue, to others that financing something, even a simple implementation plan, was going to be a challenge. So what we agreed at right from the top was whatever we implemented needed to be cost free. So that way all of us can implement it at the same level. So just an example of some of the things we implemented from the Finland trip, we looked at focusing on student independence. So that meant changing some handbook policies that focused on student responsibility, students advocating for themselves, removing parents from always kind of jumping in for their students, and really building that student independence and responsibility. We looked at social emotional well-being and specifically focused on giving time throughout the day for students to focus on things outside of teacher instruction. And so what we built in were brain breaks, which was basically for every 45 minutes of instruction, we had a 15-minute brain break. And then the other thing we implemented was a very specific plan from K all the way up to 8th about balancing homework, specifically reducing homework. And so what we saw is kind of a graded homework plan where the younger the student was, the less homework they had. And then as they got older, the amount of homework increased so that they would be ready for the workload in high school. All of those were pretty big, especially the brain breaks. Essentially what we did is we reduced instructional minutes by 25%. And what we did is we surveyed parents, we surveyed teachers, we surveyed students at all different grade levels, and we monitored that throughout the year. And we also looked at STAR testing scores throughout the year, which is what we use to monitor math and reading progression in our schools. And we saw positive results. We saw the majority of our teachers on board. We saw our parents very positive about the changes we made, and students reporting positively back. And we also saw either our scores not changing or actually going up. And so that's the data that we've been able to use to show that those implementation plans were successful and that we had positive results. And that is still going on in our Finland schools. So we use that model and apply that to our Northern Ireland schools. So the idea of coming back, debriefing, coming up with an implementation plan, and then a plan on how we're going to monitor whether it's successful or not. So I'm gonna kick it to Adrian Ferguson, who is one of our Northern Ireland principals, and she's going to share a little bit about the work that she's been doing at her school in connection with our group to set up some of these implementation plans. So Adrian, if you want to introduce yourself and then talk briefly about that.
Sure. My name is Adrian Ferguson. I'm the principal at St. Dorothy's Catholic School, which is in Glendora. So we are the pride of the foothills on the most eastern part of the LA County. So we're a little town. And we've been working, my staff and I, on being more inclusive. We know we read the book, Ensuring a Place at the Table, and it really forced us to look at, were we making a home for every single student? Were we meeting them where they needed to be met? And it was a no. we decided that we really had to work at how we were going to treat these children to rise to where they could rise, and that they wouldn't be, stamped down by us. After Northern Ireland, I got to see some amazing ideas, again, that didn't cost a lot. It was just how they went forward. We wanted to implement them, and we stepped off the plane, and as the world knows, everything was shut down. So we really walked into a pandemic. But it again gave us time to focus on what it is that we wanted to do. A lot of the pandemic put us in a place where we were supposed to look at like mental health. And what we discovered was our school was not helping with our mental health. And the things that we learned in Northern Ireland were going to help us be prepared when our students returned. We are now implementing a Genius Hour, where students will have their interests. They'll be able to do things like discover the best recipe for cheesecake, or how to woodwork and make a cross. Things that interest them, that we're not putting before them, but that are going to elevate their education, because they're going to be learning math and science and social studies and building what they want to build. So it's going to be a big project. Our junior high, to kind of give them some downtime, is going to be learning to crochet, which is really exciting. We're bringing in these skills that were not taught before. Everything was so focused on academics that the children who were not school kids, they're very bright, but just aren't very good being in an institution, we were losing them. And now we have a way to hold on to them by finding what they're interested in and keeping them so that they can handle being at the institution, being at school, because they know that they have something that they can excel at. We implemented this year the 45-15. It's not exactly 45-15 because it's a small school, small staff, but we're working it out, and the kids are loving it. They're having their brain breaks. They're taking their masks off outside, and they are more focused. In addition to being principal, I am second grade teacher, and it's like herding cats on a rainy day. You're trying to figure it out, but they know that break is coming, and you can say, if we can get through this. And I'm amazed at their focus. So I'm very thankful that the Finland group brought this back for us to see. And then I was able to implement it and kind of mesh our Ireland and Finland findings together, because it's working out amazingly. And we want to build a makerspace. We want somewhere outside where we can say, go be free, make something. Maybe a student wants to make a race car. Well, here are what you need, the supplies, and figure it out. What do you need? Can you do the math to do it? And what can you come up with? And I am just really excited. And I apologize if my speech is really fast, because it just gets me so excited to talk about what I see our children doing, making that place for them at the table and just saying, welcome, come on in and let's see what you can do. So that's where I am right now, but hopefully there'll be a lot more later.
Great. Thanks, Adrienne, for sharing. And then I'm going to introduce Ms. Paulette Clagon, and she's also another one of our Northern Ireland principals. So Paulette, if you want to introduce yourself and then also talk about your experience with Northern Ireland and what you're doing at your school.
Absolutely. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Paulette Clagon. I am at St. Gregory the Great School in Whittier, not as far east as Adrian, but it's going east. So we're kind of outside of the city. But anyway, the trip to Ireland really gave me a whole awakening. And it was great because it was really live PD. And I'm a PD freak for like, I love to new things. So like my hands-on experience. And coming back from the trip, maybe it was a blessing and a curse, but it gave me more time to try to figure out, hey, what can I do again? And it also helped me to reflect on some of the things that I had tried before, especially when they talked about the shared resources. Well, I tried to get with the local high school, and it worked for maybe 2 years. I had students go over to the high school and take algebra class in their 8th grade year, so they would be ahead up. That was way before I knew about Ireland. But anyway, lots of things we know we can do. We just have to really find that creative way of asking, hey, do you want to open up the door? But going back to professional development, I make sure that all of my teachers have so many opportunities during the year. And if you ever talk to them, they're like, oh my gosh, another one. But it just made them more excited, and they could come back and have these really great professional conversations around things that they had learned and wanted to try right away. So sometimes our meetings would be like salad bowls. Okay, everybody throw in what you got there. And then let's see how we can, do some of these things. So the Ireland trip, professional development, off the chain, great thing. And then the other thing that I really wanted to focus on, since we were talking about inclusion, was really developing and improving our STEP program. We had the program in place. It was in place. It is in place. It never stopped being in place. You have to retrain, and you have to, again, change people's mindsets and build that disposition so that they come on board with you and help you to know that you're helping the students pretty much. So the STEP program, we had time to what we wanted to do, and that's beginning to really school. And I say that because in the process, even more so than I think it would, a lot of times it would stop at the initial meeting, and then boom, we do what we do, and maybe we'll see them at report card time. But now it's a year-long conversations, collaboration, getting to know the family, and that has helped us a lot in supporting our students. And but when we talk about inclusion, I'm talking about all the students, the ones that are really, really on the high end, the ones that are in the middle, the ones that are really low, have done a marvelous job, and our parents are getting on board slowly, some of them, but they are definitely understanding. The other thing that I really, it helped anyway, was our parent support group. Getting a small group of parents that may have similar things happening at home and not knowing what to do. That was a resource for us. It was amazing the number of things that our parents knew how to do, and they were willing to share it. We were finally getting them out of that stigma of hiding their kid because they felt something was wrong or they didn't want their kid labeled. And so the support group for our parents have been extremely, they really looked forward to it, not really good. And then the one thing that really impacted me over there was their sensory rooms, and their places for students to go that needed that outlet. And so we spent the whole year looking at things and planning, buying things. Of course, we've had to shop a little bit, but what happened, it didn't cost as much as I thought it would, because we had this thing called Scholastic Book Fairs, and you get money when you have these big fairs. Well, this money was sitting for probably a year and a half, and it hadn't gotten spent. So I got an email one day. It's like, I'm going shopping in the store. There were so many sensory items in the store. We essentially built our room. I'm hoping I get to share pictures, but it was great. And so a lot of times, if you have a fundraiser, you might even want to earmark some dollars. There's so many wonderful things to do. It was a great trip. It was inspiring. It just ignited a fire even within my whole community. And I'm grateful. I hope I didn't talk too much, but thank you guys.
Thank you, Adrian and Paula. We really appreciate your perspective. And I think from those of you who are watching the video, you can see the enthusiasm and actually, the implementation of the lessons that were learned, both from the Finland trip as well as from the Northern Ireland trip, but really embracing, I think, a new disposition, as Dr. Gregg mentioned, in terms of all means all, and certainly within Catholic schools. I think we should really embrace that notion that all means all. And so we really thank you all, and I want to thank my colleagues from the LA Archdiocese and the two principals, as well as my colleagues at the university. It's a wonderful partnership that we have. And if you would be interested in getting more information about putting together possibly a trip similar to this, or developing a network of schools focusing on a particular area of concern or interest or passion for your diocese, we're more than happy to follow up with you. I'm sure our contact details will be submitted as a part of the video, but again, I'm at Loyola Marymount University, and our colleagues here are with the Los Angeles Archdiocese. So thanks again for joining us today on the Global Learning on Shared Education and Inclusion. Hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you.